Okay then guys, thank you very much for your patience. My name is Ian Bates and I work in the marketing team here at Milner Browne. Alongside me today I have Dawn Parker, who is our applications director. Dawn will be running through one of our latest add-ons that we've developed over the last few months, which is called the B1 Field Determination. She'll be giving a live demonstration of the software today and also taking any of your questions. As always on these type of webinars, what we would like to do is we'd like to keep everyone muted just so there's no background noise or no distractions for Dawn. But obviously we do welcome all questions that you may have, or any feedback or suggestions, that kind of thing. The easiest way of getting in contact with us is if you go to your GoToMeeting control panel. It'll probably be on the right hand side. You'll see a questions tab there. Please just send these through as and when any questions come to you. What we'll do is we'll review these at the end of Dawn's presentation. We do have Dawn for a couple of minutes after the presentation is finished, so we can go through those. Obviously we'll be recording today's presentation, so what we'll do is we'll send everybody who has attended a copy of the recording, so you can kind of pass that on to your colleagues or maybe review that in your own time. Just a quick reminder as well that all of our webinars are uploaded onto our YouTube channel, so if you go to YouTube, search for Milner Browne, you can see all the videos that we've done there previously. This webinar is kind of part of a mini series that we've been doing recently on some of our latest B1 apps, so if you haven't had a chance to join us, you can also view the recordings that we've done for the B1 XLX application, and also a couple of weeks ago, before we had our kind of mini break, was the B1 credit control demonstration. In the coming weeks we'll also be looking at B1 distribution as well. Okay, I'll pass over to Dawn now and we'll catch up when at the Q&A session. Okay, Dawn?
Okay, thanks very much Ian for the introduction, and good afternoon everybody. So I'm just going to show you a couple of introductory slides, and then we'll get right on to the presentation of the actual software itself. Okay, so we're just going to again look at, I've sort of subtitled this presentation today, Getting Your Data Right in SAP. I think for those of you particularly perhaps in, say, the finance department will agree that this is one area where it's really vital that all the data that arrives with you is as correct and accurate as it can be. So we're going to look at the challenges you might have in using SAP Business One, the benefits that our module can provide for you, and then a short demonstration, and as Ian said, just time for a few questions at the end. Okay, so getting your data right in SAP. So what challenges do you face? So for example, you've probably got a lot of users who are entering different transactions, documents into the system, but there might be pieces of data that have to be entered consistently and correctly, because later on you're going to use that information for financial analysis or reporting. And a typical example of this would be cost centres, project code, for example, and maybe other fields, and we'll talk about some of those later. SAP is a very open system, so it does really only force you to enter the sort of absolute sort of minimum of data to make a transaction work, and that's sometimes where the challenge arises. So again, if we look at marketing documents, for example, people are entering marketing documents because usually that's the beginning of the process with your customers, and you possibly enter a sales quotation or an order, and obviously there might be data that needs to go into that particular document because it needs to be passed through the process so that it's going to be used later on. So for example, delivery or packing instructions may be used by people in the warehouse, and so they would need to make sure that those pieces of information had been entered correctly earlier on in the stage. Okay, so as I said earlier, only certain fields, say in marketing documents, will be mandatory. So for example, the business partner, the item and the quantity. If there's other information that you need the users to enter, but there's no way of forcing them to enter it, then they may forget to enter that information. we have the ability to make certain fields mandatory, such as cost centre and project, but again, that only applies to financial transactions. So if the information isn't captured at source, then your financial analysis and reporting could end up being incomplete. And then finally, if people are choosing what data to enter, then the data may not be consistent. And that might mean that when you're coming to do reporting, you're having to manually process the data before you can actually produce an accurate report. So it's certainly an area that I've always been very fanatical about, and that is data. Data is so important to a system like SAP because it needs to be correct and accurate throughout the system, so that what everybody gets out of the system is as complete and accurate as it can be. Okay, so what can we do with the B1 Items Field Determination module that will help you to overcome some of these issues? So for example, we have a one-off configuration that you can set up per document type, so for example for a sales order or a quote or an invoice. It then automates entry of those required fields. Once the configuration is done, you don't have to remember to enter a particular field going forward. It will take care of that for you. It can be based on your particular business rules. So again, the user doesn't need to know those rules. All they have to do is enter the base data, and the other information can be picked up according to the rules that you've defined. It will also make sure that when they press that Add button, that the mandatory fields have been entered. And something to be aware of in our next version of this, which is going to be available in the next few weeks, we will actually be able to make those mandatory field checks conditional as well. So by making sure that the data is entered consistently, it will save you a lot of manual effort and time later on. And as I said earlier, particularly useful if you're in the area of financials around analysis and reporting, knowing that the data that's coming to you is complete. Okay, so let's go and have a look at a demonstration. So I'm going to switch us into, oops, sorry about that. Okay, so what we're looking at here is a sales order, and actually this particular sales order is in our own system, because the sort of beginnings of the field determination module was born out of our own needs and our own use, and our own finance department wanting to make sure that the data they were receiving was accurate, and it sort of snowballed from there really. So I thought a good way of showing it to you would be to actually show you in our own system here. So I'm going to enter a customer code here. Okay, I'm going to just enter a date. Okay, and for the purposes of this exercise, I'm also going to enter a project code, because our system, we're using one of our other modules, the B1 project, which does require the entry of a project code as well. So I'm just going to add that in here. It's just, okay, then I'm going to go back to my contents, and I'm going to enter an item. So I'm going to enter a particular item, and at this point you can see now that a number of fields have been filled in automatically. So these are in effect a number of cost centre dimensions that we use to run our own business, and it's also filled in the cost of goods sold, cost centre dimensions also, and I shall tell you a little bit about where that information is coming from in a moment. So I'm just going to put a second line in here so that you can see how it can vary. Okay, so again, you can see here now those fields have been filled in again, but we've got, for example, in this one here, we've got a difference in the value that's been filled in. So immediately I think you can see how powerful that is. So without that in place, the user would perhaps be forced to go along to each one of those values, select the value off the list. They need to know what value to select. But by using the field determination module, you can see that they don't have to know what those rules are that are needed to set the particular value. And so that they can just concentrate on entering the sales quote or the sales order, for example. So now I want to show you what happens if I actually blank out one of these values and click the Add button. Okay, it's just going to tell me I need to fill in my project code here as well. Okay, I click Add again. And this time, okay, I'm getting a warning there. I get another message telling me that a particular field is mandatory. Okay, so that's my cost center dimension 3 is mandatory. So okay, and I go back up, and it also gets my red line error message, which has basically stopped the transaction from proceeding. So there's no way around it for the user. So they need to go back into the field, and at this point they can then use the little symbol here, the little icon, to repopulate the field with the value that the field determination module had calculated previously. Okay, so once that has all been correctly filled in, I can then obviously click on the Add button and add the document into the system. Okay, so that's what the application looks like when it's in use. Obviously, from a user point of view, it's really simple, straightforward. They don't need to know any of what goes behind the scenes. So what I thought I'd just do quickly, for those of you who might be more interested in how we would go about setting this up, I was going to show you a little bit about what the configuration looks like behind the scenes. So if I go into here and go into my screen here, Okay, so what I have here is the configuration that has made those particular fields get filled in the way they did in my sales order. So you can see here that it relates to the sales order. These are the 4 fields that got filled in, and these are the rules that are then being used to fill those in. So for example, the first dimension was being filled in with just the value from this particular table. So this is a user-defined table which gets created as part of the installation of the software. If I go into that and show you that, you can see, so if you remember back to my sales order, my first dimension was filled in with the value MBS. So that happens always. The next field here is being filled in based on the item group of the item that I've entered, and it's picking up a user-defined field off my item group. So again, that was the type of work. So if we remember back to the sales order, one line had dev in it, the other line had PM in it. The other 2 fields relate to the business partner or the customer. So in this case, dimension 3 was being filled in based on the business partner, and this user-defined field on there And then the fourth one, also based on the business partner, again, this time taken from a second user-defined field. Okay, so that is the configuration, and then the flag here indicates whether or not those fields are mandatory. So again, typically most people, if they're setting values using the field determination module, will also want them to be mandatory as well. But so one of the changes that is just in progress at the moment, so I don't have it available in our live system at the moment, is the ability for you to add rules around when a particular field is mandatory. So it might be that if field X is filled in, then field Y is mandatory, that kind of rule. Okay. Okay, so just also so you are aware, some of this information, and those of you who might have configured things in the system yourself before might recognise some of this information. This comes from what's called the system information that you can see in Business One when you go into the View System Information. So it's all readily accessible, and it's also just using simple SQL queries, which again, I know a lot of people do get to grips with in terms of some basic queries. Again, obviously, if you require us to assist with configuring the field determination module for you, then obviously that's something we also would be happy to do for you. Okay. Okay, so in terms of the presentation and the demonstration, I think that's we've reached the end of the actual demonstration itself. So if I advance now, we've got a little bit of time now, I think, Ian, for some questions.
Perfect. Okay, Dawn, yeah, we have got a couple of questions which have been sent through already. Guys, if you do have any questions about any of the software or the functionality that Dawn's been running through today, please send those in now. Okay, first question here then, Dawn. Is there a limit on the number of fields that you can make mandatory?
No, no, there would be no limit. I mean, obviously you'd have to configure them, and obviously the more fields that the system has to check, it will obviously take a little bit longer when you click that add button for it to check everything. So you might see a little bit of a slowdown depending on how many fields you are checking.
Sure. Okay. Another question here. Do you have to configure each document individually, or can you do them in one go?
Okay, this is a good question actually. I was just talking to our developer before about this. One of the possibilities is that the data, because the data is actually sitting in user-defined tables in the system, that it can actually be configured and imported in, possibly even through our Excel importer tool that we were looking at a couple of weeks ago. So it's just using the standard sort of SAP tables. So you know, if you have a lot of forms that you want to use it for, you can do that. Set it up for one and then import it in for all of the others.
Excellent. Okay. There's a question here about the licenses. So do you need like one license per company, or would this be based on kind of individual licenses as well in SAP Dawn?
Typically we would sell a license per company for this module.
Sure. Okay. And I guess that there wouldn't be any sort of restrictions on the number of people that can kind of access this either, would there? No.
No. It can be assigned. So when you would have the add-on, you would have to get sort of licenses in relation to all the user licenses that you have for SAP anyway. So it's up to you then how many people you want to give access to in terms of the module itself. But obviously, depending on how you're using it, it's probably important that everybody in the company who's accessing SAP would need to be using it, just to make sure that everybody's creating that data consistently.
Sure. Okay. Another question here. Does the add-on interact with all types of documents in SAP?
In theory, yes, it does. I mean, mostly we've got it set up around marketing documents, but yes, in theory, it should work with any documents.
Excellent. Okay. Well, we don't seem to have any more questions which have come through at the moment then, Dawn. Just to remind everybody, guys, if you would like to catch up on the Excel importer tool, the B1 Excel SX webinar that we did a few weeks back, just go to our YouTube channel. You can find that there's a direct link on the footer of our website, or obviously you can just go to YouTube and search for Milner Browne, and you can find that there. I think there's also a recording on our blog section as well on the website, so you will be able to get a hold of it quite easily. As I mentioned as well, what we will be doing as part of this mini-series, we're going to be looking at B1 distribution. I'm not sure if the next week or be the following week. So please keep an eye out for an invite which we'll send through to your inbox directly. Okay, Dawn, we don't seem to have any more questions which have come through, so I think that's a good opportunity to wrap things up. Thanks again to everybody who's joined us, and like I said earlier on, what we'll do is we'll send you a copy of the recording, so if you do have any more questions, just let us know, and you know, we'll either pass those on to your account manager, or we'll get back to you directly. Dawn, thank you very much for your presentation today.
Okay, all right, and thank you very much everybody for your interest.
Excellent.
Bye.
Okay, we'll see you soon. Cheers, goodbye.